Hi, Open Noters! Welcome to the Fort Collins Symphony's Open Notes podcast, where we enrich lives through classical music. I'm Norman Manzalis, the Marketing and Community Engagement Director, and with me is my co-host, Alyssa.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Rago, the Education and Patron Development Director. In this podcast, we'll look behind the scenes of the professional music world and explore why music is for everyone. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Portuguese-Canadian clarinetist Wesley Ferreira, who will be performing Daniel Frieberg's Jazz Clarinet Concerto, Latin American Chronicles with the Fort Collins Symphony.
He's an internationally recognized soloist, chamber musician, and educator. He has performed across North America and Europe, released critically acclaimed recordings, and currently serves as Professor of Clarinet at Colorado State University. Wesley, thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation, and of course, looking forward to performing with the Fort Collins Symphony. It's always special to make music right here in my home community.
Yeah, well, we're so excited to have you, and it's been a while since I last saw you because you've been on sabbatical, right?
I'm in sabbatical this semester from the university, which has allowed me to do a lot of interesting things, which I think maybe we might get into a little bit. But I just came off of a big tour with my clarinet guitar duo, Jacques, and I'm also doing some other performing and spending time doing a lot of other work. So it's been a pretty fruitful sabbatical thus far.
Wonderful. Wesley, I'm curious about your background and musical beginnings. Where did you grow up?
So I actually grew up in Canada, and I grew up in a Portuguese family. And so music was always around me, and I was always participating in cultural events and community gatherings, and my parents loved music. And so, I really got into music through playing in Portuguese community bands. And my father's an amateur saxophonist, and he wanted me, and I very much wanted to be a part of the band that he grew up in. And so I first started playing the clarinet in this community band, and then which was beautiful because I'm playing with people who are my grandparents' age. We're talking, I was 10 years old at the time, and I'm playing with musicians who are, in their 70s, and because it's a community band, these are people who really love music, and I felt that around me the whole time growing up.
That sounds so special to have that kind of connection with people at such a young age.
Yeah, and I think I didn't think about it too much because it was normal for me at the time. And of course, I got involved in my school bands and everything throughout high school, and beyond. And that's a little different because when you're playing music with people your own age, that's great too. But as I was mentioning, being able to play with people of all ages and people who are truly playing music because they love it, I think back and I think about how special that was because it really fed into my love for music.
Yeah. Do you feel like that has influenced your music making, even into your professional career, those early experiences?
It absolutely has, because so much of my work and trajectory, as I got into college for music and I started thinking about why I love what I do, and even thinking professionally, like what maybe sets me apart from any other clarinetist, I really leaned into my experiences growing up. I leaned into the music, my heritage. And since I've put out several albums that have Portuguese music involved, I'm involved in the Portuguese musical community here in North America, but also going back to Portugal and even in Brazil. So for me, probably because it was such an important part of my upbringing musically, it has continued to be. I'm a person who just loves cultures of all sorts, cultures, and not just cultures that are like nationalities, but the cultures of communities, the cultures of organizations. I really love culture and what that does for people, what that means for people. And so that's something I always have a key eye on in the communities I perform in, but also in my own life. Like, how can I have connection to a culture? And I think that's actually what brings us together as people, as communities, as humans.
That's interesting that you bring up culture and how much it's impacted and influenced your own playing. And in past interviews, you've mentioned that there's a difference between wanting to be a professional musician and an artist, that being an artist is a calling. Could you go into a little bit more depth of what you've meant by that, and what are the differences between uh, just being a musician and being an artist?
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, that has a lot of depth to it, doesn't it? Like whenever we're talking about artistry or artists, but thinking about maybe what I've said, or even thinking about what I think about that in the moment, present time, it's, being a professional, I think musician is about mastering your craft as a musician, your technique, your instrument. I think being an artist goes beyond that. I think, connects with who you are as a person, or how you want to connect with people or move people. So from my perspective, being a musician and being a professional musician is maybe more about the craft of music, and being an artist is really about what you bring into the world through you. Because I think there's art. If we think about maybe like a piece of music, or a painting on the wall, that's art. But artistry lives through humans. It lives through people. And so I feel like I'm more interested in the artist than in the art, because again, I just feel like that connection with humans is an important part of my life. And so I really think about, whenever I see a piece of art, for example, or listen to a piece of music, I'm always thinking about the person behind it. And what were they thinking? What influences went into it? And that actually then makes the art more meaningful to me.
Yeah, and I would say as I've gotten older, that thinking more about the art and the context of how we're creating it really does play a central role, or has become more prominent in my music making. I just want to know from you, when did you feel like this calling happened? Was it something that you experienced when you were quite young, or is it something too, as you get older, you've just become more aware of it?
For me, I remember a few instances where I think I had a performance that I felt like it moved people. And I think maybe I saw it in their faces, or maybe it was something that they said to me. And actually, I'm remembering right now sometime a particular performance where the room was so silent in this moment where I was performing, maybe a little bit slower. And I just became very aware that people were drawn into the music and what I was doing. And I thought about how powerful that was. And I think from that point on, it really made a difference to me, just thinking about how art is something that people can experience and people do experience. And so I'm always thinking a little bit about, how people are experiencing the art that they're experiencing, whether in real time, like in music, or, maybe the performing arts, or in visual arts, where they're there experiencing it in those moments.
You talk about the silence being so, making you very aware of what was happening. Taking that experience and now moving forward into where you are in life now,
Mhm.
how do you connect with audiences through your music? I assume that there's some kind of intention behind that.
I always remember a big part of sort of my most recent revelation the last 5 years, I would say. And I'm thinking a little bit now about 5 years ago, and that was COVID. 5 years ago, we're sitting here in 2020. And I think from that point on, I really thought about people and my connection to people. And I think a big thing I think about in terms of that communication with the audience is always going back to my love of music. And I think for everyone, no matter what we're doing, when we're doing what we do, but we communicate our love for it, it really resonates with people. I think people will see your authenticity. You come to share a little bit of your love with others. And so for me, I love performing. I love connecting with humans through music, and even just in general. And so I think for me, I'm always thinking about how can I not just transmit the music, but transmit how much I care about it, about what I'm performing. And that really connects with people.
I love your answer to that. I think that's what music really is ultimately.
Right. Right.
With
And I think, if you think about the composer who, we're often performing the music of composers. And I often think about the composers, whether nowadays maybe sitting on their computer, or sitting at a piano, or sort of in very many olden days sitting by candlelight writing. I mean, that's just an act of love, like putting their expression of what's in their minds and their souls, putting that out, pen to paper, to then be transmitted through sound. I mean, what a spectacular and wondrous thing. So I'm often very present with that feeling when I'm performing.
Speaking of performing, Norman and I did a little stalking, and we also discovered that you are a public speaker and performance coach. And I'm wondering, how did you come into this role, and sort of what are the connections between like your musical performance and this aspect of your career?
Well, it grew out naturally from my experiences as a performer and as a teacher, as an educator. So I've spent thousands of hours on stage and in classrooms and helping others to prepare for high pressure moments. And so over time, I really started thinking about that the mindset that musicians use, the discipline, the presence, the creativity, even just like managing nerves. These are things that I talk about with my students and I've lived throughout my life. It's incredibly valuable to any profession. And so I've started speaking to business audiences and organizations about how to perform with confidence and impact, relating it to how musicians and artists deal with these same issues. And so, it's something that I think is a bit natural to me, but also something I've learned. And I think all of us musicians, especially those who have studied music and put themselves on stage, at some point we talk about this, we think about this, and I want to share that with people.
I know that we have many musician listeners to this podcast,
Mhm.
but for those listeners who are not necessarily musicians, when it comes to speaking, is there something that you've learned along the way in your career as a public speaker and performance coach that you feel like they can take away from you and that experience?
I think a big thing is just being who you are. I think so much about putting yourself out there or speaking has to do with overcoming sometimes psychological barriers that we bring into what we do. I mean, I always like to remind myself first and then others. I said, we're human. And sometimes I like to say we're only human. It kind of really brings it into a reality that we're not supposed to be perfect. I haven't actually, Norma, I even thought about that a little bit coming into our podcast here. I started feeling those natural human feelings of like a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of nerves. And here I am speaking to the world about these things. And so even myself, I remind myself that I should be who I am, that yes, maybe there may be things that I wish I did better. That's totally natural. But I think if we can be who we are and work in life to be comfortable with who we are and to present that honestly, I think that's the best we can do because it comes from a place of authenticity. And so that's always my message.
Do you find that you deal a lot with performance anxiety, like when you're working with students and also in this realm? Is performance anxiety something that comes up quite a bit? Or do you find that focusing more on authenticity kind of even removes that from the equation?
Yeah, I think performance anxiety is again something that's so natural, and sometimes we think about performing as being like only on the stage, but we're always performing in everyday life. So think about the last time you met someone for the first time over a coffee, or maybe in your line of work you're presenting something to someone, or even thinking about meeting your girlfriend or boyfriend's parents for the first time. These are all moments where we are sort of performing, right? We want to show our best to whoever's there. So we're always performing. And so I think, again, it's natural from an early part of life to be a little anxious or to be a little nervous about that situation. But, that focuses a lot on the negative aspects of every situation. And I think one of the things musicians can do really well is reframe what we're doing because always in a piece of music, we're having to look at notes on a page, black and white math. And then we start to reframe what it is, what it means based on context. And so, we can use that power of reframing or use that power to think about a situation not in negative terms, like I'm nervous, I'm this. But again, as I mentioned earlier, thinking about the love that we have for the situation. So the joy we get out of these situations. And I think if we can focus on the positives or on the joyous or on the grateful aspects or on the loving aspects of ourselves and of the situation, that immediately I think calms us down a little bit and gets us a little bit more grounded. And so those are some of the things that I think about and I talk to my students about. And then, generally just experience in life. The more we do something, the more comfortable we get with it. So some of it is just, the creating that comfort level. And obviously psychologically, that's a big part of it.
Wesley, I have to ask, just because you are
Sure.
so eloquent and also very well put together in terms of your thoughts, what is your zodiac sign?
Oh, I'm a Capricorn.
Okay, that makes so much sense
I've heard that
because,
before from people. They've said, "Oh, that makes so much sense."
well, from what I know, because I'm very much an amateur, just astrology,
Ah,
zodiac lover, with Capricorns, they tend to be very analytical, and always thinking and trying to piece together how things work. And I think that is probably why you've heard that before, that you are very much a Capricorn.
just as what you mentioned, I do like piecing those things together for sure.
Well, I just have to also bring it back to the music, of course.
Yes.
And let's talk about the concerto that you're going to be performing with the Fort Collins Symphony, Latin American Chronicles. Could you give us a little bit of background on the piece?
Yeah, it's an incredibly exciting work. So it blends classical and jazz traditions with rhythms from Latin America, so tango, samba. And it's also quite cinematic. It's full of color and energy, and it's such an accessible work for audiences. So I actually first discovered this piece when I was listening to music through a recording. And I think it somehow came up on my, I don't know, like suggested piece, or I think I heard a snippet somewhere of it, and I said, "Wow, what is this?" And I think I Shazammed it and found it. So, oh boy, it's an incredible piece, which I absolutely adore. I love it's virtuosic, but it's also like very, very deeply human. And I've now performed it a number of times, and always, always, always it connects with audiences. It is such an incredible piece. And the composer Daniel Frieberg is we talk about living, whether we're playing the music of living composers, he's very much living and such a wonderful human being and incredibly talented composer. So I'm really excited for audiences here in Fort Collins to hear it.
So it sounds like you've met Daniel Freiberg, right?
That's right. Actually, so he lives in New York. He's originally from Argentina, and he moved to New York when he was 21, and he got involved as a pianist and got involved playing in several groups, and he's toured with Grammy Award-winning clarinetist, jazz saxophonist as well, Paquito de Rivera, and also has a son who lives in Colorado. And so,
What?
yes, he lives in Colorado. So I reached out to him several years ago before I had ever performed this piece. I think it was maybe 6 months after I first heard the piece, and I just reached out to him. I let him know how much this work spoke to me. And I told him, I said, I will play this concerto. I will absolutely tour with this concerto. I love it. And when he found out I was from Colorado, he mentioned that he's often in Colorado visiting his son. So we actually had we drove and met each other, had a beautiful dinner together, and have since very often conversed about the piece and what have you. But he's a wonderful human being as well.
Wow. Well, in your meetings that you've had with him, has there been any moments where you were maybe thinking, I can see that your personality is very much influenced and in the music that you wrote for this piece?
I'd say so. So a couple things. He's so approachable. He's so warm, and he's got a great sense of humor and a wonderful imagination. And so you absolutely see that in his music when you hear it. Maybe remember those words. And we also hit it off so well. And thinking about that, it doesn't surprise me then that I loved his music. I mean, I feel like any performer who I think hits it off with a composer probably hit it off with their music as well. So that's been sort of an interesting afterthought that as much as that I love his music, I can see why, because, as a human, I really love him too.
I was just thinking about your statement about, if you can hit it off with a composer, more than likely you'll really enjoy their music or get along with it. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I probably would have not done so well with Debussy or some of these other
Right.
pieces that I find so difficult to perform. Like, yeah, I wish I could speak to the composer and get to know who they are.
And I've thought about that in other ways too, that okay, maybe you don't uh, totally jive with their whole personality, but there's probably something about every composer that you can relate to, right? So, I think that relating to the composer, relating to the music, relating to the audiences, relating to what you're doing is so important part of like then soaking it in and transmitting it.
I remember one of my probably most vital experiences in music school was actually this kind of thing, like learning how to, I was playing a piece that I didn't particularly care to play, but like having to really understand the composer's voice in order to make some kind of meaning out of it was a huge growing experience for me in terms of like even empathy, I would say, being able to sort of make myself understand someone else's perspective when it wasn't natural to me. So that's a really wonderful thing you mentioned here about like having to get to know all the composers' voices and really find ways to connect with them.
As musicians, we're performing, reinterpreting pieces that maybe we don't like, right? Like I think we've all been there where for some reason we're finding it really challenging to make sense of maybe a piece of music or something that we're doing. But then I think it's like our jobs as professionals and our jobs as people who love music and have this incredible gift and incredible opportunity, and we're fortunate to be able to put this music out into the world to interpret is to find something about it, that we connect to and to bring that out. Just hearing what you said about your experiences too made me think about that.
I just have one more question in this section before we move on, and that is for listeners who are going to be experiencing this concerto for the first time,
Mhm.
are there any particular things that you want them to pay attention to or listen out for?
This concerto has beautiful lyrical moments. So it's in three movements. Most obviously, the second movement is slower, it's grand. I think people are going to really, it's lush. People are really going to enjoy that. But even in the outer movements, the first movement and the third movement in particular, third movement's much more of like a dance. And I wouldn't be surprised if people would be tapping their toes and maybe even want to clap along. And there's a part in this third movement where the orchestra itself will be clapping. And so I've had a few performances where as the orchestra is clapping, then the audience begins clapping too. It's a very natural thing. And I love that because it brings the whole hall together. But even in those outer movements, the first movement and the third movement, there's really beautiful lyricism because lyricism and anything that's melodic and flowing doesn't just happen in slow music. It can also happen in faster music. And so, that's a little bit of part of maybe an insight about me as a performer too, that even in the more technical and flashy and virtuosic musics, I always try to find what's lyrical in that. This piece has a lot of opportunity to showcase that. Again, myself, I'm also someone who loves rhythm, and I often think about music as either being a song or a dance. And so this piece is absolutely a song and a dance at the same time. And so I think people are going to love the rhythm of it and the dance-like character of this piece as well.
Well, it's clear that you enjoy playing in many genres. You've mentioned that the Frieberg piece actually brings a lot of these different genres together. And you also mentioned at the beginning that you have a duo, the Jacques duo. Could you tell us a little bit more about your duo? What brought you together? How did you form? What kind of music do you play?
The Jacques duo is a clarinet and guitar duo, which I think when people first think about that, they think, well, that's maybe an odd pairing. But the instruments itself, they lend themselves well to all various styles of music. So if you think about the guitar is involved in just about every style or genre of music in the world. And the clarinet, of course, is involved in classical and jazz music, but also in a lot of different folk musics from around the world. And so these instruments really work well together. We perform all over the world, and we just came off of actually a 26 concert tour in 52 days across 10 states, two Canadian provinces. We drove over 8,000 miles and 140 hours in a car, and we performed all over to audiences big and small. So musically, we do like to play music from different genres, different styles, different parts of the world, music that lends itself well to both instruments. This year in particular, because we have so many concerts, it's been a big part of my concert season. So
What did you play, Wesley? Did you have a set program or
yeah,
what
we did. We
what
did
did you
have we
perform?
had a set program that sometimes changed depending on where we performed and maybe the desires of the concert promoters. But we'll play some pieces that are familiar, so audiences might recognize pieces like Chico Chico no Fuba and maybe some other, like for example, Brazilian samba or bossa nova type pieces. But then we also play pieces that were written from composers specifically for the clarinet guitar, our own arrangements, and we also even compose and write our own music. And so, yeah, it's been a very creative outlet for me, the Jacques Duo, and so that's been really fun.
Do you have any fun tour stories to share? Sounds like you were on the road for quite a stretch of time.
Yeah, there's always fun tour stories, and I think it's just as fun as you make it. So, the things that are less fun, waking up in a different bed every day in a hotel, the 5 hours driving before going to a concert, the 14 hours driving on your day off to get to the next concert location. But again, it's all kind of what you make of it. So even in those moments, there's a lot of fun between my partner Jackson and I, and we always make a point to stop off in unique places and talk to people and
Is there a particular place or a story from this tour in mind that you're just like, oh man, I can't believe that happened?
probably so many. I'm trying to think. We often meet a lot of fun characters. Like we kind of joke about if our group was a sitcom, then we'd have like certain characters that would be their episode. It would be like this person would be in this episode and they would carry the whole thing. But there's a lot of fun moments. Like I'm remembering in some concerts, um, we play some Spanish flamenco music on our concerts, and we had this one concert where people were so lively, and people were yelling like in the middle of the performance, they were yelling "Ole!" and we were responding to them on stage, and
Where was
so
that?
so actually it was in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And it
Okay,
was
Sheboygan.
Sheboygan, Wisconsin, but they have this incredibly beautiful concert hall that was a restored like 1920s theater. And it's completely restored, beautiful. There were over 900 people in the audience, which had a certain amount of energy. And then people were yelling "Ole!" in the middle of it. And got a little rowdy, I would say. Got a little rowdy for a classical concert, but we love it.
I love a rowdy
Yeah,
classical
absolutely.
concert.
Absolutely. I think it's the way music, if an audience is rowdy, it means they're involved, right? It means they're touched, they're moving, they've been moved by the experience. And I think that's the most beautiful thing.
Well, you know, speaking of fun, I just have to say that I love your wife, Copper, who is also a clarinetist,
Yeah.
and I have the privilege of getting to perform with her somewhat regularly since we both play in an ensemble with the Wyoming Symphony up in Casper. And since I'm also a what we call in the music world a homosexual relationship with a flutist,
Yeah.
I'm really curious about what it's like being married to another professional clarinetist. Do you argue about who gets to practice in a particular space at home?
We often get that. You might also get that question too, but we've often gotten that question, and I think it's actually been only positive, to be honest. Like it's only been positive because you're with someone who absolutely 100% understands your need to practice. So your desire to purchase a new instrument, the struggles that go into it. And also when you have big moments, they also understand how big of a moment that is for you in your life. And so um we've never been really competitive with each other because that's another thing that can happen when you have people of the same two musicians. And I think that probably speaks more to our personality and the relationship we have outside of music. But we've definitely enjoyed playing duets together. That's another question we get sometimes. Do you guys play duets? Yes, we play duets. We've even had tours where we've played, two clarinets and piano and performed. And one of the most special thing actually is when we get to play together in an orchestra section. So we've had the privilege of being able to sit next to each other in the orchestra and play. And that's actually a beautiful experience because, I just feel such trust. I think being an orchestral musician and playing next to another musician, you want to ideally have trust in that musician, trust in that person, and kind of understand what makes that person tick musically. And we just have that, I think, because of our experiences in life together. So that's been incredible.
I have a question about Copper. Do you happen to know what her zodiac sign is?
Okay, she's a Scorpion.
Oh, really?
Scorpio, yeah.
Okay. Actually, I knew that because we
Okay,
were up in Casper and she had told me that she was a Scorpio and we got in this conversation about zodiac signs and
interesting.
yes, Scorpios tend to be much more intense, but will be quiet about things. But they're also very open. And it's funny that you mentioned the competitive thing because my husband,
Mhm.
who is a flutist, is a Virgo, and he is much more competitive. I am not. I'm a Libra, and so I'm much more balanced.
Okay, there you go.
I just want to have a good time, and yeah, whenever I've received that question about what's it like dating a flute player since you're a flute player,
Right.
it's like, we've made it work for 15 years, and
Yeah.
as long as we have open communication, it's all good.
Sure, I think it depends on the people, right? And it
Right.
depends on how much their own identity is wrapped up in being a flutist or being a clarinetist, and much of it is maybe shared to other parts of their lives.
Yeah, well, I had a fun conversation somewhat recently with Copper. I told her that we were doing this interview with
Hmm.
you, and I asked her if there were any questions that she wanted to maybe ask you on this interview because, you know, we were speaking only nice and wonderful things, speaking well behind our musicians and our interviewees. And so she gave me three questions that she wanted me to ask you, if
Okay,
you're cool with that.
that's fun.
So, her first one was, what Toronto Maple Leafs player would you want to have lunch with, current or from the past? And what would you ask them?
Wow. Okay, so a little context. Obviously, people are finding out I'm a big hockey fan, and Toronto Maple Leafs is I'm a passionate fan. So, okay. I feel like I'm gonna make this quick because it might be boring for some people. I would probably, I'd probably have lunch with Doug Gilmore, who was my favorite Toronto Maple Leaf player growing up. I'd actually ask him questions that I think would relate to maybe my profession because I think a professional athlete has to cope with a lot of the pressures and ups and downs that professional musicians have. So I'd probably ask him a lot of questions about, the pressure-filled moments and maybe what he did psychologically to get over that. And, when he performed his best, I'm guessing he was probably in like a very kind of a flow state in games, which is very
Mhm.
similar to musicians performing our best. So I definitely would share also with him how much he meant to a little boy growing up. So,
Amazing. Okay, here's Copper's second question. She wanted to know if you could only wear two outfits or jackets to perform in for the rest of your career, what would they be?
oh my gosh, um, I could only wear two. I
Only
think
two.
only two.
So
Well,
you
they
have a day to
probably
wash them in between concerts.
yeah. They can be washed. Well, I'll be practical in saying I'll probably pick two suits. Maybe one would be like a tux. That way, if it was really, maybe it was a more fancy occasion, I'd be prepared. And then the second might be something a little more flashy. Maybe I'd wear like a velvet jacket with a white shirt, and it's actually something I wear often when I perform concertos, and that might be a little more flashy of a jacket, and that maybe some solid black pants.
You're always so stylish, and I just want to bring everyone's attention to your website to
Ah,
just check out Wesley's website and the photos in his gallery. He just looks so sharp, and yes, you can see that beautiful outfit of the velvet. I love it.
that's right. That's right.
Okay, and then the last question from her is, if you had a second home, what country would you have it in?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I love to travel and been fortunate enough to be in many places. Boy, that's a tough question for me because I feel both invigorated by being in big cities. So I'm thinking about places like Paris, which I think is just an incredible city.
Oh, I love Paris.
Yeah, I love New York. I love Lisbon in Portugal. So these are some of my favorite city places, but I also love to kick back and relax and be in kind of quiet places by water. So
Oh,
I'd probably love to have a home by the beach somewhere quiet. But if I had to choose, right now, I'd pick maybe a home in the Amalfi Coast, and that's in Italy, overlooking the water. And because I think I've never felt so relaxed in my life as I did when I was there a couple summers back. So, boy, I'd love to have that kind of feeling back, and maybe the home would help.
well, I hear that they have delicious food there too. I'm a really big foodie, so if you get that second home, please invite me. I would love
Yes.
to come
Yes. Well,
over.
I can't live there all the time, so it'd be open for people to come and
We'll
stay.
have to schedule it out.
Yes. Love it.
Well, before we wrap up, Wesley, we've got some fun short answer questions for you.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes. Ready.
All right, Wesley. So, favorite piece to play on the clarinet?
Okay, so probably actually like the Brahms Clarinet Quintet. So this is clarinet with a string quartet, and I think the music of Brahms is so soulful, and there's just so much in every phrase, and so that would be it.
Nice. I love playing that piece. That's it.
Mhm.
Such a fun one. If you weren't a musician, what would you be doing?
I'd like to think that I'd be involved and continue to be involved in something creatively, maybe something with communication, something with leadership or something that connected the community. But I am also thinking that at the time when I was making a decision, when I was in high school, what am I going to be? It was either
Mhm.
going to go into music or I was probably going to be a history teacher. So I think if
History
I
teacher.
a history teacher because I love history and I think, and I love teaching.
Mhm.
So at the time, that's what I was thinking about. So if I had to decide now, if I wasn't a musician, I'd probably be doing something in communication, creativity, maybe leadership. If I look back at when I was deciding, yeah, maybe I'd be a history teacher.
What thing in history, or is there a particular genre you think you would want to have taught?
Yeah, I just love history. And I love history because kind of like I've alluded to a lot in this podcast, just I like the idea of getting into other people's worlds and thinking about other people's experiences throughout history. And also when you think about history, you have something that you can really look back to, and it makes me feel connected to all the people before me. And I think connection's such a big part of my life, and so I think that's probably some of the reasons why I love history.
My question, obviously, as I mentioned before, I love food. I
Ah,
want to know what is your favorite snack to have at break?
I find that having like almonds or dark chocolate in particular, I love having some dark chocolate at breaks because I think it's simple, it's a little more healthy, and it also kind of gives me a little spark of energy. It's also a little like a little bit of a treat, and I think that's nice to treat yourself sometimes when you've
Yeah.
worked hard. So
Is
I
there a
would say.
particular brand that you like?
No, no, don't have a particular brand, but I do like to try different things. So like, I won't just go and get any dark chocolate. I'll probably just like try different things.
So, other than the performance with the Fort Collins Symphony and Latin American Chronicles, are there any other performances or dream projects in the works that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, musicians, we often have things coming up that we're thinking about. And this coming spring, I have another 20 or so performances with that duo Jaka again in throughout the US and also in Canada. I'll be going to actually Tanzania in June to
Have you gone
perform.
there?
I've never been there, so that's just so exciting for me to perform music and do some outreach there. So that's an exciting thing coming up. Some dream projects, I really do love playing concertos. And so maybe a dream project would collaborating with a composer on writing a new concerto that maybe influences some of my own Portuguese or Latin roots with classical music. So that's one that I have in my mind to be thinking about in the future.
Maybe it could be the Portuguese Chronicles.
Ooh, there you go. Could be the Canadian Fort Collins Portuguese Chronicles, something
Oh,
like that. Yeah,
so specific.
so
Obviously,
specific to me.
we would have to premiere that.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah.
All right, Wesley, well, it's been wonderful talking with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to having you on stage with us to play Latin American Chronicles.
Yeah, thank you. Such a joy. I appreciate all your thoughtful questions and can't wait to share this incredible concerto with the Fort Collins Symphony audience. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Thanks for tuning in to the Open Notes podcast. We appreciate your support for the arts. We'd love to know what you want to know, so send your questions and suggestions to podcast@fcsymphony.org.
For more information on the Fort Collins Symphony, visit our website at fcsymphony.org. We can't wait to hear from you. Until next time.
Bye.